Welcome everybody to 52 Living Ideas. Tonight we'll continue with the Analects, book 14, and we will be starting with chapter 13. And we'll have 1 to 2 readings of the text, and then we'll go to Jason's translation. Then from there, we will open it up for comments about the specific text that has been covered. After that, we'll move on, and then at the end we'll leave some time to have some dialogue about the text itself, a little bit more of a free-flowing discussion. So from there, does anybody wish to read their version of the Analects?
I can read my version.
Okay,
I can
great.
read mine.
Yeah.
Okay.
Very good.
So 1413. The master asked Gongming Jia about Gongshu Wenzi, saying, "Is it true that your master did not speak, did not laugh, and did not take anything?" Gongming Jia replied, "Whoever told you that must have exaggerated. My master spoke only when it was the right time for him to speak, and so others were not tired of him speaking. He laughed when he was happy, and so others were not tired of him laughing. He only took when it was right for him to take, and so others were not upset about his taking." The master said, "So it was like this, or was it like this?"
And the next one.
And
The
14,
next one?
Yeah, 14 as well.
14, the master said, Zhang Wuzhang used his fief, a town called Fang, to bargain with his ruler for an heir in lieu. Although he claimed that he did not coerce his lord to accept the deal, I do not believe it.
Thank you. Yulia. Would anybody else like to read their version of the Analects? If not, I mean, I can go ahead and read a version, or is that good? All right, then I'll go ahead.
Yeah.
The master asked Gong Ming Jai about Gong Ming Wen, saying, "Is it true that your master speaks not, laughs not, and takes not?" Gong Ming Jia replied, "This has arisen from the reporters going beyond the truth. My master speaks when it is the time to speak, and so men do not get tired of his speaking. He laughs when there is occasion to be joyful, and so men do not get tired of his laughing. He takes when it is consistent with righteousness to do so, and so men do not get tired of his taking." The master said, "So, but is it so with him?" Number 14, the master said, and I'm really sorry if I'm not capturing the names correctly, Zhang Wu Zong, keeping possession of Fang, asked of the Duke of Lu to appoint a successor to him in his family, although it may be said he was not using force with his sovereign. I believe he was.
Okay, thank you, Joe, Julia, to read chapter 13 and 14. This one has some historical background. Okay, so let me read first. There's a lot full of names. Okay, so the master asked Gong Mingjia, okay, about the grandee of the grandee of Wei, Gong Shu Wenzi. So here's 2 persons. One is Gong Mingjia, one is Gong Shu Wenzi. I believe Gong Shu Wenzi already dead. Okay, so but we talk about this later. So that's Confucius ask Gong Mingjia. Okay, that's one person. About in the when Confucius stayed in the state of Wei, and he asked one guy. His name is Gong Mingjia, about his boss, Gong Shu Wenzi. Okay, so that's his boss. About his what kind of person. So is it true that your master doesn't speak, doesn't laugh, doesn't take anything? Okay, sounds like he's a clean person. Gong Mingjia replied, the report is exaggerated. My master speaks only when the timing is right, so people are not tired of his speech. He laughs only when people are happy, so people don't tired of his laughter. He takes things only when it is right to take, so people are not tired of his taking. The master said, is this so? Isn't it so? Okay, so Chinese here called qi ran, qi, qi ran. Okay, so I have to translate as, is this so? Isn't it so? So it's a little bit confused here. It's confusing here because we are not sure, Confucius believe Gong Mingjia's comment or not. Okay, because even in Chinese, and we don't know what's Confucius believe or not believe. But if you refer to later chapter 18, I think Confucius' opinion is, I agree. Okay, he probably in this kind of person. So that's just a comment. Chapter 14. This one is regarding another person called Zhang Wuzong. The reason Confucius talk about this person is some relationship with Confucius' family, because Confucius' father, Su Lianghe, that's Confucius' father is a powerful man. I think according to the account, he's like 10 feet tall. Probably in today's Western standard, probably over 6 feet. Okay, a strong, powerful guy, and then he rescued. I think he rescued Zhang Wuzong. Okay, so they had some relationship here. That's why Confucius comment on this person. So the master said, Zhang Wuzong asked the ruler of Lu to make his son as the successor of Fang while he was in exile. I put it in parentheses because the background is Zhang Wuzong had committed some crime and he escaped. And in another way, he is in exile. But he occupied the city of Fang, okay, and asked the ruler of Lu to make his son as a legal successor of Fang. Okay, so he kind of like hold hostage, okay, threaten the ruler of Lu to make his son as a successor. Okay, otherwise he will fail. I think that's the historical background. Okay, so in this one, Confucius said he didn't threaten his lord, but I didn't believe so. Okay. So that's just, these two is just two historical events, and then it may not be that important today, and then but during that time, they are Confucius contemporary. So that's why Confucius disciple keep the record of what Confucius comment on these people. Yeah, thank you, Aman.
Thank you, Jason. And thematically, I think these two actually link up pretty well. I was listening and reading along to see what is sort of the underwriting theme here. In verse 13, he's taking someone's testimony. That's what all of this is. And at the end of it, that very sort of cliche expression, "chiran, chichiran," is kind of the colloquial version of "really," with that intonation in an English tone. So it implies skepticism, a sense of it could be true or could not be true, which is the commentary on the testimony. That taking testimony from somebody, you need to not accept it wholly, which we take, and Paul was pointing this out at the beginning of the meeting, some of these, very hackneyed ideas, this is their inception point. This is the point where somebody kind of put this down for the first time, that, hey, don't trust it just because you hear it from somebody. Be a little skeptical and do some investigation for yourself. And then in verse 14, he's again sort of going through a testimony. He's testifying about what Zhang Wuzhang asked and what the consequences were. And at the end of it, he says he didn't threaten the Lord. I don't believe this to be so. So what he's indicating is not just the invalidity of simple testimony, but also that those words carry weight, that testimony is I don't want to say a sacred thing, because we're not going to raise it to that level. Nobody has put their hand on anything and sworn to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. But it's just one tier down from that in Confucius's mind. He's saying that when somebody says, he's saying when someone else says something, you don't want to accept it as gospel testimony. But when you, as a shi or a budding junzi, say something, you must be thoughtful of your testimony, because it will carry weight with it. There are repercussions for what you have to say, and they will sort of propel themselves. The old expression, a lie can get its way around the world before the truth can put its boots on. Your testimony will have its own momentum that go beyond your moment of saying it. So be thoughtful what you're actually testifying to other people.
Sorry, I was on mute. Thank you, Amon and Jason. Now we'll open it up for comments. Welcome, Kwon. We're covering number 13 and 14. So maybe if I could actually just ask a quick question. What is he saying about essentially the successor, like essentially the process of appointing a successor? Number 14.
Okay, so number 14, the word is a let me show. Okay, so basics, he talked about, just read the word by word. Zhang Wuzhong, that's the person. Okay, he used the city called Fang. Okay, ask his successor. Okay, his son. Okay, become, because Zhang Wuzhong was the how do you call it, fiefdom. Okay, he is the lord of this city, because that's the feudalism system, right? The duke of Lu, and underneath they have the city of Fang. Okay, the head of the city is Zhang Wuzhong, and then because he is exiled, so Zhang Wuzhong asked the ruler of Lu to make his son as the lord of city of Fang. Okay, so he said he is not threatening the ruler of Lu, but Confucius doesn't believe so. Okay, so that's the story. Okay, the background is Zhang Wuzhong is a guy who being claimed is smart, a lot of wisdom, and then he commits some crime. It's supposed to be punished, but he still occupied his own city, and the kind of threat the ruler or the duke of Lu to make his son as a legal successor of the city. Okay, and he said he's not threatened, but Confucius said, "Oh no, I don't believe so." It's kind of like the contemporary events, and the Confucius is just common. I'm not sure how significant of this one, and then that's the story I read. Yeah, so
A
Thank you.
parallel
Thank you.
might be if Henry Ford went to his son and said, put this person in charge of accounting. I think that'd be a really good idea. The weight that you carry by what you're asking has an implicit threat to it that it makes it hard to defy you. And that is what he's kind of getting at, that the weight of the words, because of this person's position and his history, made this implicitly a threat, even though he says, I wasn't threatening him. No, but you were asking without good faith.
thank you, Amam.
Yeah, thank you. That helps give me a little bit of context. I appreciate that, both of you. Quan.
Yeah, there is a note in the Eno translation which might be useful. It's written that Zhang Wuzhong was the leader of one of the red families of Lu. Confucius' father was in his service. So Zhang fled into exile in 550 BCE, so a year after Confucius' birth. But prior to doing so, in return for allowing the Zhang family to remain lords of their domain at Fang, he offered the Duke of Lu possession of his family's sacred turtle. So apparently, he gave his family's sacred turtle to the Duke of Lu. And because of that animal having a special value, I suppose, the Duke of Lu allowed his family to stay the lords of Fang, even if he was himself in exile since 550 BC. So there was really no coercion, if we believe Robert Eno. There was a transaction.
Yeah, it seemed like a bit of coercion. I don't know, to me, initially, but that was my impression. But I'm going to be honest. Number 14 was kind of a mystery to me.
Yeah, I think number 14, and at least I don't see that's important. The reason I don't see it's important because probably don't have other historical account to talk about these things, right? Kwang, have you read any other historical account about this other than?
No, except for at 518 of the Analects, there is a comment, a story about Zhang Wuzhong grandfather, who precisely built a kind of temple for that sacred turtle.
Turtle, for turtle.
Yes, and I suppose that turtle
No,
must
that one was Zhang Wenzong, not Zhang.
Exactly, his grandfather.
Oh, that's his grandfather?
Exactly.
Okay,
Because
okay.
because as you know, turtles can live many years.
Yeah.
So
okay, so Zhang Wenzong is his grandfather.
Exactly, and
Okay.
having built a temple for that turtle, apparently violating rituals because he used the same symbols that is supposedly only for the king of Zhou. So that animal must have a very special value since the Duke of Lu was willing to exchange it for a domain.
Yeah, we might not see that's important, but Confucius may see that's important because first, that's his contemporary. Secondary, his father used to, I think, work for them or, had a relationship with Zhang Wuzhong. So, and that's Confucius' hometown. That's the place Confucius was, I think, was born, or at least his childhood, or at least his father used to work there. So to Confucius, that's important, and to us, we may not see that's so important. But next 3 chapters, the story is very important. That's why I grouped them together. So if you got confused on this one, don't worry too much. But I hope you don't confuse on the next story, because that one probably the most important story in the spring of autumn.
Yeah, but at least we learned one thing with 1.14, 14.14, I'm sorry, is that the sacred turtle has a high value because you can exchange it for a domain. So it's something to know.
Yeah. Well, my mother used to say, knowledge is not something you carry on your back. So,
Yeah,
you know,
I
that.
suppose. I suppose.
Does anybody wish to comment on number 13? I thought, the insights, that were provided were pretty deep. The idea of accepting somebody's word and in the perception that somebody is good actually versus identifying for yourself that somebody is of high character, and so essentially, before you just if we think about it in terms in the reverse, we ought not necessarily accept gossip or negative information about someone. So why would we then accept positive information about someone as well? Now, it's to a certain degree, we're always going to rely on somebody saying something, but ultimately it's up to us to make our own judgments. So I thought that it's an important way of looking at word of mouth, or potentially gossip, or potentially even praise in this particular instance. Anyway, so we'll go to Quan and then Jason.
Well, that 14.13 is a little bit amusing for me because it reminds a little bit some paragraph of the Chuangzi, okay? Because in the Chuangzi, you can read some chapters when the Taoists are mocking the Confucianists precisely. And in the 14 chapter, the paragraph 14.13, at the end, the master said, "Is that so? How can that be true?" If you're reading that paragraph in the Chuangzi, you can remove the master and you can put Chuangzi at his place, and it would be exactly the same thing. So it's a little bit strange to find that kind of paragraph in the Analects, but I think it's funny.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I think that's a great comment on this. So, since I'm a big fan of reading Zhuangzi and Taoism, so to the later chapter, especially later part of book 14, there's a lot of kind of interaction between Confucianism and Taoism. So I will point out later. But here I'd like to talk about the importance, okay, of chapter 13, 14.13. Okay, I think the significance is two things. Okay, first, let me reread the my translation. Okay, here. I think the Gongmingjia's comment is interesting. Okay, so he said the report is exaggerated. My master speaks only when the timing is right, so people are not tired of his speech. He laughs only when people are happy, so people don't tire of his laughing. He takes things only when it is right to take, so people are not tired of his taking. So the Chinese word used "yan," okay, that means tired of, or you sick of the behavior, right? So I think one thing in Confucius is very important. As a Junzi, you don't please people, but in the same way, you don't want people complain, okay, about you, okay, or tired of you, okay. I think that's first thing. I think that's important. That's why Gongmingjia talking about this. Second thing, he talk about speech, laugh, and taking, okay. So these three things, Confucius, let's assume Confucius believes so, and assume Confucius appreciates this kind of behavior. I think that's important. Confucius is not that kind of strict, like don't laugh, always, have a solemn face and then never have fun. It's not this way. If you do it in the right way, in the right timing, in the right situation, it's fine. I think that's important to me on this passage. Yeah.
Thank you, Jason. Does anybody else wish to comment on number 13?
I just want to point out very briefly, because Jason's right. This testimony does indicate what is proper, and that a person need not take themselves so seriously, though, sitting in the back of church and elbowing each other in the ribs is probably inappropriate. But it's almost a meta analysis, because it's testimony about testimony that Confucius ultimately is saying, really, is this so? I don't know how reliable this is, because I'm asking you about what people say, which itself is gossip. What you're giving me is gossip. I can't absolutely buy that. And so there is a meta-analysis of what constitutes good evidence. That's not necessarily the sort of thing many people point to when they look at Confucian thought, or when they look at Eastern thought in general, especially from this time. But this is a meta-analysis of validity, of what actually makes for sound evidence. And that is, I don't want to say light years ahead of its time, but it's a nice little almost throwaway in the Analects that I think others return to really scrutinize, particularly some of the school came later afterwards. Quan, help me. Not the legalist. No, not the legalist. The Maoist. Sorry. They were the logicians of ancient China.
I want to come back to Mark. Go ahead. But there's something profound in what you just said, Alon.
Well, do you want to keep exploring that, Joseph?
No, it's okay. You can go ahead.
Because when I'm hearing Amon, I'm hearing that what counts as evidence can't just be hearsay, but only from someone who knew him. And who knows whether this first guy is even going to believe whether what he's hearing is true. You can't really say.
I mean, as long as we're going down this rabbit hole, I'll give it just another 2 minutes, and then I'll whip us along. But yeah, he's asking Gong Mingjia about his master because of rumor. I've heard all this rumor. He gets then conflictory testimony from Gong Mingjia, and now it's raised the question in his mind of, okay, perhaps you are a more reliable source, but what you're telling me is so antithetical. It's so the complete opposite of what I'm hearing from others, that I need to be skeptical of both sources here. I need to find a better way to make this assessment than the direct testimony or the hearsay. And so there is, and like I said, it's kind of interesting because it's a meta-analysis of testimony and then the evidence offered as testimony, and he doesn't accept any of these. And so later schools of Confucian derivatives, particularly the Maoists, who, like I said, were kind of the logicians, not an exact parallel, by the way. They take this kind of thinking very seriously, and they would scrutinize. When can we be more certain about something than merely having an inclination towards it? That was something that was unique for their school of thought. They didn't carry a lot of traction. They didn't gain a lot of steam in ancient China, but there were those who took this idea seriously enough to explore it deeply and try and make a system of thought from it.
Go ahead, Mark.
Well, that wasn't actually what I was going to ask about, but I'm glad that you went into it further. And the master here, our master, isn't going to believe anything that he hears. He's still skeptical. So he's showing a healthy skepticism. But it's also curious that he's wondering, I'm looking at I think it's the Loud translation, right? Can that really be the right explanation for the way he was? And just the fact that Confucius is curious about the way another person is, maybe is notable. Why should he care about who and what this other person did? And the other thing is why is he asking only about speaking, laughing, and taking? What kind of an inventory is that? Does that include everything we can do? Taking is very broad. It doesn't include action. Speaking is broad, but it doesn't include necessarily all thinking. And it doesn't mention, for example, feeling sad or crying, which we know is something that was appropriate at certain times. And it's also, okay, so I'll stop there.
So maybe this is a good time for actually me to chime in, is that, I mean, from that, you're right, it's not a full inventory of emotions, but I think it's meant to be a sample size to capture the essence of what the individual is. But I think, this is something that we can discuss later, but I was literally in a discussion this morning when the question was posed to me. How do you validate your sources? And this is actually an instance where it's because at some point you have to rely on other individuals and you have to rely on information that is provided to you. So what is the process that you actually use in order to validate the information you're being given? Now, Confucius in this particular instance is obviously telling us not to take just word of mouth. However, there is, inevitably, this is something that is going to occur in our lives. And it's really important to think about, how do you validate? And one of the things, and I'm looking for a couple of my notes, but one of the things was that if the person that is telling you about another individual is taking a soundbite or misrepresenting of what they're saying and not talking about a part and not the whole, then that is an indication that that individual is trying to bias your opinion about what that person, who that person is and what they're saying. So that should be one reason as to why you remain skeptical from that source. So, that's just, there's a process that we all can go through in order to validate the information that we're being provided with. And I think that that's a very deep point, because we have to think about that in today's world as well. Should go ahead, Joy.
Can I just say one more thing about that?
Yeah, please.
That if Confucius is putting himself in the position of the one about whom he's asking, like, what would my disciples say if they were asked if I did X, Y, and Z? Then he's thinking, I'm not perfect. I know my disciples see that I'm sometimes too much in this way or too much in that way. But if someone asks them about me, I think they're going to present me really as a Jinzi, in the way this disciple presented his master. And so maybe that's why Confucius is willing to doubt what he hears, because he knows that even his disciple would kind of portray him in an ideal way.
So we'll go to Joy.
Yeah, this is something what I think too, because sometimes the people put on too much focal point or the attention to one person, especially the leader, especially the celebrity, is overwhelmed to that person. And I think when the person, they just do the normal way, smile or not smile, speak or not speak, it's sometimes it's none of the others' business at all, but people would just put too much attention, a focus in that special person. And I think it's really, when I see the last statement about, is that so, or is that really so? I feel like, can all those people leave him alone? Find, the true way that, yeah, the master, even sometimes the teacher, when I teach, the student, they will sometimes make fun or sometimes make a statement. They will feel like, whatever I did, small, tiny things, they will make big deal, or they will make some of the comment. I don't think that is, I'm from another perspective, So the master will say, is that so? And they are never tired of, saying something. They are never tired of, make comment. So I would just like, sometime we will just, leave them alone. The leader, the celebrity, or whoever, on top of the, maybe the on the stage, the focus should be, not too much. Whatever they smile, whatever they don't smile, whatever they speak, or whatever they don't speak, just, that is their normal life. They are the normal people, just don't make too much, comment or attention on them. I don't think it's fair for master or even anybody. That's what I think.
Thank you, Joy. Quan, appreciate your comments.
Yes, I tend to interpret that paragraph as something lighter, because let's not forget that the life at the court in ancient times is made with a lot of gossip. Okay, and this paragraph is showing Confucius talking with another aristocrat, and in the mood of gossip at the court, and with a light humor. Even if we can elaborate on deeper philosophical implication of what he said, of course, because in the life at court, you have to be very careful of what you say, of your attitude when you say the stuff you say, and when you take things or when you refuse things, okay? Because a lot of stuff at court in the life of the aristocrat at the time would be mediated by the exchange of small gifts, for example. So I tend to see this scene as with a lighter perspective. I stop here.
Thank you, Quan. Allison and Jason and Paul.
I was just really thinking about, when he says, he spoke only when it was the right time for him to speak, and he laughed when he was happy. He only took when it was right for him to take, so others were not upset about his taking. I mean, it kind of reminds me of the sort of Native American idea that you only take from the land what you need from the land, rather than just taking everything and destroying it all. And I mean, that's what I was really thinking, that some people, they talk all the time, but they don't actually say anything. And then some people hardly say a word, but what they say is really valuable. And so I think it's really, it's just kind of like showing that side of him. Maybe the other people didn't believe it because it's hard to believe, but I think it's an important value that sometimes we forget about.
Agreed. I think awareness of the situation and timing and appropriate reaction are, I'll almost go so far as to say they're virtues, but they probably don't reach that level. But anyway, Jason.
Yeah, I thank you, Kwang, talking about this kind of, you said the situation, what should be the light gossip, in the royal court. Okay, we should, and I don't expect we have this kind of extensive discussion on this. But anyway, since Mark also make some important point, and I've been quiet thinking for a while. His first challenge is talking about these three things, right? Speak, laugh, and take, right? I think the situation is this, because you always in the royal court, you always be easier to be quiet than speaking. Should always be silent, okay, or no expression than nothing. Always to refusing then take something. That's an easier way to behave. And then the Gong Mingjia talk about his boss, speak in the right time, take in the right situation, and laugh when people are happy. So I think that's important. And that comes to second important question or remark from Mark about how do you present your boss, right? Because that's a subtle skill, because you don't become like brag about your boss. You try to be humble. When you ask about myself, I can be very humble. I say, oh, I don't know anything. I make a lot of mistakes. I try to correct myself. But if you ask my subordinate or my son, he tried to present me, he cannot say this way. It's a very, very difficult skill. Okay, and then just pay attention. In chapter 25, we will not cover today, but next week, Qu Boyu, that's Confucius' friend, his messenger can well present his boss. Because if you think of this, when people ask about how's your boss, you don't want to brag it. Well, of course, in America, you probably fine to brag it, but that's assumed in the ancient Chinese society. You should not brag about your boss, but you try to be humble. But in what way you can be humble about your boss? I think that's a very difficult skill. All right, I'll stop here.
Thank you so much, Jason. Paul, and then we'll go to the next set.
Yeah, this was a perfect embodiment of what I said I loved about this, which is all these different frames that you guys put out here, from the light, court gossip, to like the deepest, like historical precedent setting concepts. But I think it highlights the idea about how future generations read a text like this, and then they put their meaning on it. But and I heard shades of that in this conversation. But I want to ask, and because thinking about other things we've said, and taking this more seriously than just sort of a little bit of humor about light gossip on the court, which I'm going into that approach for a moment. I recall one of the readings, we found someone, Confucius or whoever was talking at that point, putting honor of the family above truth, essentially, and saying, of course, the honorable man lies and conceals his family's misdeeds. I'm overstating that. So I'm relating that to this, like, you better raise your eyebrows and be skeptical, because that's the norm, is you don't tell the truth about your dirty laundry in the court or something. I'm just asking if that's a valid way to think about this. And secondly, if the things that the wise person doesn't do, about he doesn't, talking, taking, all that, is this element of control of one's being, complete control of one's being. So you choose your responses in a way that is exactly what is needed, but that implies a lot of self-control, a lot of control of emotion. And is that part of this? So those are my questions and comments.
I'm going to defer to Jason or Kwan on that, or if Aman is there.
Kwang, you have an answer on that? Or
Go ahead, Jason.
no, I no.
No, you first. No, you first. No, you first.
Okay.
That's very Confucian.
Could I jump?
I do
Yeah.
I do want to say I do think that an element of the self-control is important in what's being conveyed here.
Yeah. Well, I would say that I'm happy that everyone is interested by that paragraph, okay? Because it shows that this paragraph has true value because it narrates the circumstances with humor, but at the same time, it points to three things which are very important in the life of an aristocrat of ancient China: your behavior, what you say, the way you say it, the way you express your humor, and your way you take things or you refuse things. Okay, because once again, a lot of relations in among the aristocrats of ancient China would go through the exchange of small gifts, and the way that you would react to a small gift from another aristocrat can have enormous national consequences. Okay, so I think that the fact that we discussed for 15 minutes about those lines show that the writer of that paragraph has been completely successful because he introduced things with humor, but at the same time, everyone here understood that he was talking about serious and vital things.
Thank you, Juan. Mark, briefly, please, so we can move on.
Yeah, when you said gifts, Kwan, it made me think of when the president receives a gift from the queen, or the president gives a gift to another head of state, the meaning of that. But I was going to react to, I think, what Paul said by just asking, isn't the relationship between master and pupil one of the 5 fundamental relationships? So it would in some ways be related to the relationship between parent and child, Paul, that you were mentioning from an earlier passage. And there's, between the leader and the subject, and between husband and wife, and between siblings, I guess would be the 5th one.
Yeah, exactly.
So if we can bring that in at all.
Well, why don't we table that for the discussion afterwards? I think that's a very good point. And that's something we can explore a little bit more deeply. So why don't we
before we read the next set, okay, first I really appreciate we spent 1 hour to discuss 2 verses, which at beginning I don't see that's important, but turn out it's important for everyone. But doesn't matter how you take this one. I just want to emphasize the next 3 chapter. The historic background is 100 times more important than this Gong Mingjia or Zhang Wenzong, this kind of person. Is very, very important history. So even you think the first 2 lines are very important, I just want everyone to think the next story is even more important historically. So before we read this one, I kind of like brief about the story because it will be full of names, but all these names are very important. First, I'd like to mention they have the Duke Wen of Jin and the Duke Huan of Qi. Okay, these 2 persons are about 100 years before Confucius. So Confucius lived in the time there's a feudalism system and there's no leader. But 100 years before, even the central government, or so-called the Zhou, the state of Zhou, the common emperor, is weak. But among the warlord, they have the leader. One is Duke Wen of Jin. Another one is Duke Huan of Qi. And Duke Huan of Qi is the first one. So Confucius really respect this one, because Confucius said his idea is we should go back to the older society. Even the Zhou government is weak, but if we have a leader, everything will be much better. So that's the first historical background. And the second thing I'd like to talk about is how does the Duke Huan of Qi become a leader? Because he used a very smart, capable prime minister. His name is Guanzong. Okay, Guanzong, this person has been mentioned many times in Confucius, and sometimes being viewed as the founder or the grandfather of the legalism. Okay, but because of his contribution, Confucius still appreciates his work. And he did something very strange, because when the Duke Huan of Qi, okay, when he was a prince, he and his brother Zhou, okay, remember there's a one called Duke Huan of Qi, another one is Zhou, Prince Zhou. These two are fighting for the throne. Guanzong is the chief advisor for Zhou, okay, so they are fighting, and Guanzong is a good archer. He tried to kill Duke Huan of Qi, but Duke Huan of Qi survived, and turned out Duke Huan of Qi become the emperor, or become the duke, and then he killed his brother. Okay, so he originally supposed Guanzong would be also put into prison because he wanted to kill the duke, but turned out Guanzong become his prime minister. Okay, so and turned out to help him, become a leader of during that time. So that's the historical background. And then with this background, and we read this one, I hope will be a little bit more clear. And this story is the most important story. They even have more people involved. We can spend 2 hours to talk about this story, but I just put the name, show up in this one, and just remember this one could be the most important story in the spring and autumn. Okay, so I'll stop here, and then we can start to read it. Unless you have something not clear about this story. Then...
Jason, just a quick question. Did you say at the end that Guangzhou became the minister to Duke Wen?
Yeah, Duke Wen of Duke Huan of Qi, the hegemonic, the leader of the warlord.
And that was the one whom Guangzhou had tried to shoot with an arrow, right?
No, he became the prime minister of his enemy, his old enemy. Okay.
Okay.
So people, Confucius disciple, okay, complain about Guanzong. He talk about, Guanzong should sacrifice, for his boss, right, for his lord, because his lord got killed, and then you should die for your boss, or at least, but turn out that he didn't die for his boss. He worked for his boss' enemy. Okay, so I think that's the story. But Confucius still think, okay, he did the right thing. Okay, so I think that's the background, and then we can start to read. And this name will keep showing up through the Analects.
Thank you for that. So who would like to read their version?
I can read.
Thank you, Joy.
Yes, 14:15, right? Okay, the
16.
master say, yeah. Okay, the master, right? Yeah, the master say, Duke Wen of Jin was devious and not upright. Duke Huan of Qi was upright and not devious. Okay, 14:16. Zilu said when Huan Gong assassinated Gong Ziju, Zhao Hu followed him to his death, and Guangzhong did not. He had not fully developed his humanness. Had he, the master say, when Huan Gong unified the nobles, it was not through military force, but by the efforts of Guangzhong. How about this level of humanity?
And the 17th.
17?
Yeah. Or 60.
Huh?
Yeah, 17. Yes, 17.
17?
You're right.
Okay, Zigong say Guangzhong was not a truly good man when Huan Gong executed his own brother Gong Ziju. He was not only incapable of dying along with his lord, he became Huang's minister. Confucius say when Guangzhong served Huan Gong as minister, he made him leader of the nobles and straightened out of the disorder in the ring. The people are benefiting from his down to the present day. If not for Guangzhong, we would all be like unkept barbarians, wearing our hair over our face and fastening our clothes on the left. Shall we exercise the sincerity of simple people who will hand themselves to death in the ditch with no one knowing about it? The translation is from Charles Muller.
Thank you, Joy.
Thank you for that.
Anyone want to try to read all these names?
I can take a crack at the leggy version.
Thank you.
15. The master said, the Duke Wen of Jin was crafty and not upright. The Duke Huan of Qi was upright and not crafty. 16. Zulu said, the Duke Huan caused his brother Jiu to be killed when Xiaohu died with his master, but Guanzhong did not die. May not I say that he was wanting in virtue? The master said, the Duke Huan assembled all the princes together, and that not with weapons of war and chariots. It was as through the influence of Guanzhong, whose beneficence was like his, 17. Zigong said, Guanzhong, I apprehend, was wanting in virtue. When the Duke Huan caused his brother Jiu to be killed, Guanzhong was not able to die with him. Moreover, he became prime minister to Huan. The master said, Guanzhong acted as prime minister to Duke Huan, made him leader of all the princes, and united and rectified the whole kingdom. Down to the present day, the people enjoy the gifts which he conferred. But for Guanzhong, we should be wearing our hair unbound and the lappets of our coats buttoning on the left side. Will you require from him the small fidelity of common men and common women who would commit suicide in a stream or ditch, no one knowing anything about them?
Thank you, Amon. So we'll go to Jason's translation, and then we'll open it up for comments. And due to time constraints, we'll just keep it to one comment per person.
Okay, we are 15. Okay. The master said, Duke Wen of Jin was crafty but not upright. Duke Huan of Qi was upright but not crafty. So Duke Huan of Qi is the first leader. And after he died, and the Duke Wen of Jin become leader. So that's the second leader. And they total have 5 leaders through the history. 16. Zilu said, Duke Huan of Qi killed his rival, Prince Zhou. Zhou's advisor, Zhao Hu, committed suicide, but Guanzong didn't. Zilu said, "Is he not Ren?" The master said, Duke Huan led feudal lords many times without using weaponry or chariot. This achievement was due to the effort of Guanzong. This is his Ren. This is his Ren. Chapter 17. Zigong said, "Is Guanzong not a man of Ren?" So before was the same story was Zilu's comment. Okay, and then you can see Zigong, another great student, have the similar comment. Okay, so they both try to challenge what Confucius' evaluation of Guanzong. Zigong said, "Is Guanzong not a man of Ren? When Duke Huan of Qi killed Prince Zhou, he was not only incapable of dying along with his lord, but also he became the chief assistant of Duke Huan." Okay. The master said, Guanzong assisted Duke Huan to be the hegemonic leader of all feudal lords. The world became one at once. People have benefited from him till today. Without Guanzong, we would be ruled by barbarians, wearing our hair loose and fastening our clothes on the left. How can he be like a common man or woman who keeps trivial promises, who hang themselves lay dead in a ditch unknown to others? So here, important thing, that's I think last time we talked about barbarian, right? So in Confucius or ancient Chinese point of view, the barbarian, just like a Greek, when they talk about barbarian, is non-Greek people, right? Okay, so like Persian. For Chinese, the barbarian, how to separate? Not because the language, not the culture, the clothes, okay, the hairstyle. So that's the way define the barbarian. So Chinese wear the clothes, I think, on the right, on this side, and then the barbarian country, or non-Chinese, wear clothes on the other side. So, okay, I think that's how Confucius defined we are still Chinese, cultured people, okay, not become barbarian because of Guanzong, okay, help all the states in the Middle Land defend the barbarian invaded. Okay, so that's the comment. So, Aman, you have your turn.
Yes, sorry for the interruption. I had to say goodbye to the grandson. Real simple. These 3 chapters about Guanzong, they tell you that being a Ren isn't a prescription of actions you follow. It is a culmination of your personality, your character, your being, and how you go about approaching things, also combined with what those outcomes are. And so that line that's very particularly important here about Duke Huan led feudal lords many times without using weaponry or chariots. This is his Ren. This is his Ren. That's the significance, that you are taking the humanity of others into account in your actions. And so I think all 3 of these chapters really try to get that point across, that you can be Ren if you are Ren, not by doing steps A, B, and C along the way.
Perfect. Thank you for that. So I see Yulia, you have your hand up.
I had just had a quick logistical question. So if Guan Zhang had tried to kill Du Quan with an arrow earlier, why did Du Quan trust him enough to hire him as his prime minister?
Okay, that's a long story because Guanzong had a good friend called Bao Shu. Okay, that's Guanzong's good friend. So they kind of like, they decide, okay, either one, okay, Duke Huan or Prince Zhou, either one of them will become the Duke. Okay, so their decision is let's help one on each. So if one is successful, then we can help the other one. So turn out Guanzong's boss lost, right? So his good friend Bao Shu helped Duke Huan of Qi. Okay, so he strongly recommend Duke Huan of Qi said Guanzong is a capable person. You must use him. Okay, even he tried to kill you because he's loyal to his boss. Right now, his boss is dead already. You just use him. He will be loyal to you. Okay, so that's the story.
Thank you. Are there any other comments that anybody wishes to? Go ahead, Juan.
Okay, so those 4 paragraphs refer to a very important period in the history of China. Let's not forget that in 770 BCE, the Zhou royal house lost a major battle in the west of their domain, and they fled to their eastern capital as Luoyang, and it began the period known as the Eastern Zhou dynasty, starting in 770 BCE. So the period from, let's say, 770 BCE to more or less 500 BCE, meaning the times of Confucius, was the time of the hegemons. Okay, what is a hegemon? The hegemon was the feudal prince in ancient China who was acknowledged by the other feudal lords as being the most powerful and would act as the protector of the weaker Zhou king. And that title of hegemon, Pa in Chinese, is granted by the Zhou king. Okay, and officially, there are only 5 acknowledged official hegemons between 770 and around, and the last one was King Chuang of Chu. But if we accept King Chuang of Chu, he would be the 6th hegemon. The 5th one and the last one in the official list was Duke Mu of Qin, who died in 621. So BCE, of course. So when Confucius said that Duke Huan 9 times brought the feudal lords into assembly without the use of weapons or war chariots, this was due to the efforts of Guangzong, okay, his prime minister. Meaning that when he said that without the use of weapons or war chariots, it's maybe a little bit exaggerated, okay, in the sense that, of course, he used the prestige of his culture and of his good administration of his own state, of course, but the fact that his state was powerful and capable to attack the other states was a major factor that the other states acknowledged him as the hegemon at the time. Okay, so culture matters, of course, but power matters too. So let's not be too naive and be dragged into the too idealistic rendition of the Analects. So what Confucius meant that how would it have been proper for him to be faithful like a common man or woman and slit his throat in a ditch where none would ever know? And here we have a major concept of Confucianism, okay? You have the xiao zhong, the small loyalty, and the da zhong, the big loyalty. for the average person, it was expected that he would commit suicide or he would retire from public life if his lord is a loser in a contest. However, for a man of outstanding talent and virtue like Guang Zhong, to be exclusively faithful to his lord would be perceived as a small loyalty, meaning that because of his high talents and his great virtue, he must see himself as the servant of all the state or even the servant of the whole Chinese civilization. And in that sense, there's no need for him to commit suicide because Prince Chu was the loser. His duty was precisely to serve Duke Huan because that would be the great loyalty, the Ta Chong. And that is a big concept in the life of the scholars in accepting the precepts of the Confucianist school. I stop here.
Thank you, Juan. Jason.
Yeah, thank you, Kwang, talking about. That's exactly one thing I want to talk about this one, because that's Confucius is try to, and you can translate as loyalty, but my translation I translate as a trust. You keep your word, right? So trustworthy in the text called liang. Okay, liang means the small trustworthy. Okay, so okay, I die just like a common man and a woman. Just hand it because their boss died, so they hand themselves die in the ditch. Nobody know. That's not Guan Zhong want to do. So another thing I'd like to talk about is about the wars. Okay, so Confucius in general is anti-war, but I find out it's very similar to there's one dialogue from Plato's dialogue called Menexenus. Okay, who basically is Socrates talking about wars. So Socrates talk about three kinds of wars, right? The one is war against the barbarian, which is Persian he's talking about. Another kind of war is the war among the Greeks, like when you fight with Sparta. Okay, that's all Greeks. Okay, that's war between the city-states. Then the third kind of war is the civil wars. Okay, that's within the essence they fight. And the same similar concept is during the Confucius time. So he also sees three kinds of, even though Confucius didn't like Socrates make clear they have the three kinds of war, but you can see Confucius idea, he talk about within the state, they have the family fighting, that's kind of civil war. And among the state, the feudal law, they have fight. That kind of like fighting among the Greeks in Socrates' time. And here, why Guan Zhong is great, according to Confucius, because he's leading all the states within China to fight the outsider, okay, which is barbarian. Okay. According to, that would be parallel to Socrates talking about fight against the Persian. So Sparta and Athens will line up together to fight against Persian. That's this kind of sense. And in this sense, Confucius say Guan Zhong is great. But here is a little bit controversial here, because in the previous book, I think in the book, which one I forget. Okay, before, I think in the book 5 or book 6, Confucius has complained about Guan Zhong is not following the Yi, okay, because he set up his office, and in a certain way. So the Confucius himself has a different comment on Guan Zhong also, because Guan Zhong, even he's great, but he didn't follow the Yi, which is richer.
Thank you for that, Jason. Would anybody else like to comment on any of these, actually, 15, 16, or 17? Go ahead, Mark.
Well, I just want to mention that I was a little surprised, maybe even shocked to hear about the suicide of the underling in the face of his master's death. And it kind of reminded me of Sati, where the wife would sacrifice herself in India, which has been very controversial, to say the least. But not only does Confucius say, no, that wouldn't have been the right path, he seems to disparage the suicide by saying dying alone in a ditch, rather than what you would think would be a little bit more of a noble act under the system.
Okay, Quan.
I would say that first, it only applies to the member of the high nobility being
Right.
under the direct supervision of the prince. For example, the common soldier or Prince Ju were not expected to commit suicide. Okay, they would simply go to the victor, and it was perceived as perfectly normal. It was not expected of them to have that kind of attitude. So that kind of attitude would be expected from the members of high nobility who were the direct advisors of the loser. However, there is an opening. If the aristocrat serving the loser felt that it was meaningful for him personally to commit suicide because Prince Ju, for example, was the only lord that he would serve, that was his personal decision. However, if another member of the high nobility, having served as an advisor to Prince Ju, think that it was better for him to keep on living because of his family, because serving Duke Huan was as valuable, it would not have been dishonorable from him to stay alive to serve a higher purpose.
Thank you. Go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, I think that we don't have to have a conclusion here, but that's a big question we can discuss, from time to time. Is should you die? Should we die according to Confucius' teaching? Should we die for something, right? Because your boss was killed, you failed because you want to achieve something. So should you die for that? Commit suicide, or just personally, I don't see Confucius agree with that idea. I think Confucius will kind of discourage this kind of behavior. That's my opinion. But of course, he also talked about 伯夷叔齐 when the Song dynasty, right, being overturned, and they refuse to eat until die. And he said it's 人. That's true. But it's a big question, does it worth it to die, okay, for some purpose? Okay. So I think that's a big question, and I stop here, and I don't see we will answer.
Yeah, we can talk a little bit further about it afterwards if that is still a point of interest. But why don't we get to, in order to get stay on schedule here, why don't we finish what is it, our last three,
Yeah,
I believe.
In 18, 19, 20, so we finish.
Is it 8? Okay, yeah. All
Then
right.
we can finish
So
the half of book 14. It's a long book, so.
it's a very, that's the reason why I want to keep it moving.
I think we'll probably only get to this next section if we want to keep open discussion at the end. So if we get to 20, that's pretty good.
I think so too. Yeah, 21, 22, 23, and 24 is.
Let's get to 20, to 18, 19, 20, then we can have open.
Okay. Okay. So let's do 18, 19, and 20. Would anybody like to read their version?
Okay, I can read.
Thank you, Joy.
Yeah, 1418, right? The minister, right? The minister Zhuang of Gongshu Wenzi rose to the rank of the court officer together with Wenzi. When the master heard of it, and he said he certainly deserved the appellation of refined. 1419, Confucius was speaking about the evil of the Duke of Ling of Wei. Kanzi say, if he is such a person, how can he stay in power? Confucius say, Zhong Sun Yu takes care of his Kanzi's guests. Preacher Tuo handles the temples, and Wang Sun Jia is his military commander. With ministers like this, how could he fall from power? 1420, the master say, if your words are not humble, it will be difficult to put them into action.
Thank you, Joy. Would anybody else like to read their version? Go ahead, Mon. Thank you.
I can read the Leggy version again.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
No problem. Verse 18. The great officer Xian, who had been family minister to Gong Mingwen, ascended to the prince's court in the company of Wen. The master, having heard of it, said he deserved to be considered Wen, the accomplished. 19. The master was speaking about the unprincipled course of the Duke Ling of Wei, when Qi Kang said, since he is of such a character, how is it he does not lose his state? Confucius said, the Zhongshi Yu has the superintendence of his guests and of strangers. The litanist, Tu, has the management of his ancestral temple, and Wang Sujia has the direction of the army and forces. With such officers as these, how should he lose his state?
Thank
20.
you, Mon. Oh,
20. The
I'm
master
sorry.
said, he who speaks without modesty will find it difficult to make his words good.
Appreciate that. Sorry, I cut you off there a little. Right?
So 18. 公属文子 House Minister. Zhuan, okay, Zhuan is公属文子 House Minister, rose to the rank of court officer together with Wenzi. So the situation is, I think 公属文子 is the first one we talked about, right? Chapter 13, right? 公属文子, okay, about his speak, laugh, and the taking, right? Right now, back to talk about him again, okay? I believe during this time he already died. So 公属文子 is a house minister, okay? Zhuan rose to the rank of court officer together with Wenzi. That means your subordinate, your house minister, become your colleague in the royal court. Okay. The master heard of this and said he certainly deserves the posthumous name Wen. Okay. Wen I translate as culture, and one of the translations is refined. And I know Eno insists it should be called pattern. Okay. So I probably insist it should call culture. So, but anyway, Wen is the highest ranking for the posthumous name. Again, that's a Confucian tradition. When a person dies, you will give the survivor will give the person one single character name, okay, to conclude his life. Usually being called Wen, or I translate as culture, means usually is the highest. and sometimes we call wu, or so-called powerful or military. Okay, so if he been successful doing something, military. Okay, so depend on, they have the complex way to do it. So here, back to chapter 13, right? Confucius probably believed the comment from Gong Mingjia, okay, about his boss, his master, because here in this chapter, Confucius said, yeah, he deserved this name. Chapter 19, the master was speaking about Duke Ling of Wei, not following the Tao. Okay, so that's okay. Next book, book 15, it starts with Duke Ling of Wei. Let's talk about when Confucius traveled or in exile to the state of Wei. During that time, the ruler is the Duke Lin, okay, of Wei. So this conversation must happen after Confucius come back from his exile in Confucius' old age. And the Kangzi, he is the head of Ji family, which is the most powerful family in the state of Lu. The master was speaking about Duke Ling of Wei not following the Tao. Ji Kangzi said, if the situation was like this, why did the state not fall? Okay, Confucius said, Zhong Shu Yu attended the guest, which means he is taking care of diplomacy. Preacher Tuo attended the ancestral temple. That means Preacher Tuo is taking care of the ceremony or rituals. Just for the reference, I think in book, which book? Book 3, 13. Okay, Confucius talk about, book 6, 16, Confucius talk about the preacher Tuo, he was eloquent. And Wang Sunjia attended the military. So the situation was like this. How can the state fall? Okay, so I think here is Confucius is talking about even the Lord is not following the Tao, but the whole government has been kind of like everybody taking like today's government, right? Like division of labor, right? Zhong Shu Yu taking care of diplomacy, right? Zhu Tuo taking care of the ceremonial affairs, domestic affairs, and Wang Sunjia taking care of the defense. So the state is still stable. Even the lord, the ruler, is not in doubt. I mean, spoiled, okay, or a tyrant, because foreign affair, domestic affair, military, they have the certain people to take care. So the state still not full. Chapter 20, the master said, if one's words are not modest, it will be difficult to put them in action. So I think we don't have to explain this one because it's typical Confucius idea. You should speak humbly, speak less than you can do. Okay, you don't want to talk too much and then do little. He would like you to speak little but do a lot. So, Aman.
Yeah, these three, I think, link well together. They're all about merit. They're a discussion of merit is of most importance. The examples he cites, whether it's the posthumous name Wen, or the three ministers who run the government of a decadent lord, or even this last one where he says if one's words are not modest, it's difficult to put them into action. Action is what's meritorious. So all three of these verses link together under the idea of not merely being internally beneficent, but putting it into action, doing something meritorious in the world around you is what grants you Confucius respect. And what that respect implies is that you must be some sort of elevated person to be respected by the master.
Thank you for that, Aman. Now we'll open it up for comments on any of these on 18, 19, or 20. I actually feel like Aman actually really did capture this, clearly and in a concise way. I think, again, if we're looking at number 20 in particular, I think that one's fairly straightforward. Yet it's a reoccurring theme throughout the Analects, to not be overconfident, not overpromise, and to be careful with your words. So I think that's very something that we see consistently throughout the Analects. I do think that what Aman had said with the idea of actually putting these virtues into action and what it means to be accomplished, specifically comes out in 19. So I think that we can explore that a little bit more deeply as we go on, but I would like to talk about that because one of the things that I have gotten out of this second go around, if we will, since we've started over the past, what is it? I don't know, 2 months since we've restarted the Confucius meetups, is I'm starting to see the more practical aspects and application of it in the later chapters. Maybe it's there in the earlier chapters as well, but it wasn't as evident. It seemed a little bit more ritualistic in the earlier chapters, and that's how I felt about it anyway. But anyway, I find that the practicality of it is actually being demonstrated and with it through his students or just the ideas themselves. But anyway, I'll go to Yulia and then Juan.
Well, this is just a point about 1420. In a note, a footnote in my translation mentions the Han scholar Ma Rong and says, following his reading, one could translate this remark as, if a person is able to speak without shame, he is the genuine article, but it must have been difficult for him to acquire the integrity he possesses. So it just seemed interesting, like it could be also flipped as the person who speaks immodestly is speaking that way because he has, built himself up to be someone who can speak that way. That was interesting.
Actually, it is interesting because that directly relates to number 1 in the chapter, and we can go back and make that link. But that is, that if that's what's in your notes, and it does make sense that if you are modest, that you do feel some degree of shame. Therefore, you're not necessarily going to allow your ego essentially overtake your better judgment. And I think that's where kind of shame is one of those things that we talked about in great detail a few weeks ago. But yeah, thank you for that comment. It goes directly to number 1. Oh, go ahead, Quan. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's okay. So I would like to talk about paragraph 14.18 and paragraph 14.19 because those two paragraphs, once again, are at the center of the mythology of the Chinese ruling class. Okay, in the paragraph 14.18, Konshu Wenzi was capable to recommend his officer Zhuang which was his subordinate, but a talented subordinate, to a position of equal standing at his duke's court. So here we have the core idea of meritocracy, in the sense that you have the hereditary nobility, of course, and in that level of hereditary nobility, Gongshu Wenzi was the superior of Zhuang. However, he was capable to acknowledge Zhuang's talents and virtue, and it was okay for him that Zhuang would be on the same footing than him at the ducal court. So it's very important in the Chinese ruling class mythology, that the idea of meritocracy, the Junzi by birth and the Junzi by merit. And sometimes one can be a Junzi by birth and a Junzi by merit at the same time, of course. And the 14.19, the other idea within the Chinese ruling class mythology is that the ruler having the charismatic virtue would attract to him the xian people, the capable people, the worthy people, capable to run the state. In this case, Duke Ling of Wei was not someone who was outstanding, but apparently he retained enough charismatic virtue to attract three men who were xian, who were worthy, who were capable, Zhong Shuyu, Zhu Tuo, and Wang Sunjia, to serve him, and by serving him, serving the state of Wei. I stop here.
Thank you. Actually, yeah, thank you for pointing that out. Jason.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. And I probably need to leave earlier. And today, I think it's Yulia, right? Is that Yulia talking about the chapter 20,
Shane.
about her translation? Actually, the word, okay, 其言之不作, okay, that word literally means 线, a 线, okay, this kind of word. But originally, I translate, if one never feels shame about his words, and it would be difficult to put them in action. It sounds very strange in English, why you speak something with shame. So I change to humble, means a little bit reserved. But actually, literally, that word means shame, because just like in Christian idea, everybody have kind of sin, this kind of feeling of sin, okay? So you were not so proud of doing everything. So same way, in the Confucian teaching, when you speak, you should feel a little bit shame about what I say, because I'm always afraid I'm not able to do it. So I think that's the subtle idea here, and it's very difficult to translate because I try to match the meaning of the word, but it's difficult. So that's another big subject to discuss about the meaning of shame. I think we already talked for last week, but it's endless subject anyway. But anyway,
I think it is important. Can I ask you, what for number one? You use the word shame, though, right?
Okay, let me see the number. You mean for book 14, number 1?
Yeah.
Well, let me double check. Yeah, that's different words. Okay, he asked about shame. That's the Chinese word called 耻. Okay, so that's a different Chinese word, and this one should call 做, or in modern Chinese we'll call 残. I don't know how to explain it. I have to think about it. It's a Kwang, do you have a better way to talk about 池 and 禅? You know the two words I'm talking about, right?
Yes, yes.
Right? What is
Yeah.
禅? Okay. I don't know. I like to hear what you said now.
I don't know, maybe Zan would be calamitous, but calamitous is maybe a little bit exaggerated.
池, well, you know these two words.
Yeah.
You all can translate as 线, but it's different. But give me 1 week. I promise. I think
Yeah.
it's
Well,
different.
I mean,
About
and I only say,
reservation, maybe reservation. Okay, a certain
Yes, I
reservation.
need more like a reservation, but on the surface, it means a 线, right? I 残
Yeah.
right? When I say 残, so I feel it's kind of like Christian concept of sin. Okay.
Yes, or
In the
to be shy, a little bit shy.
A little bit
You know,
shy. Yeah.
yes, because in French Quebecois, because I live in Montreal, and the variety of French from Montreal is a little bit different from the French from France. There's an expression which is very interesting. Okay, il faut se garder une petite gêne. Okay, so il faut se garder une petite gêne means that you have to keep a little bit of shyness when you speak to others, in that sense of shame or shyness.
So you mean French have this kind of concept?
Oh, of course,
Can
my
you
dear.
put in the chat so I can copy it? See?
Yes,
yeah,
yes, il faut se
that is
garder
very,
une petite.
That's very interesting because I think the
Yeah.
it's very
different
interesting.
have a different way. For example, like sin, this kind
Yeah.
of concept also
Yeah,
different.
but
Well, it's
yeah,
called without, and on 20, it says without modesty,
yeah,
which is
yes,
actually,
That's the
that
translation.
sounds like, yeah, but that's
yes,
what it sounds like Juan's talking about.
yes, exactly. I like very much the idea of you have to keep a certain modesty. Yes.
Yeah, but that the meaning is right. But the problem is the word is 残, which means 线, but it implied
Yes.
modesty.
Yes. 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 The idea of modesty, shyness. Maybe we would have to find an own English word having the meaning of shame, shyness, modesty at the same time.
But anyway, that's a very difficult. I know it is a very difficult word to translate. But anyway, I will leave this one here, and then
I just have a follow-up question.
Please.
I could be imagining this, but wasn't there a time where we were talking about Confucius not wanting you to feel ashamed because then it's preventing you from kind of cultivating yourself and developing yourself if
Can
you
I
are
tackle
mired in the
Yeah,
shame?
Yeah, but that's the
Can I tackle this a
metaphysical
little?
shame. Yes.
actually, go ahead. Yeah.
I want to say Yulia is actually hitting on a really profound point here that you have to, according to Confucianism, you need to be bold enough to speak, quote unquote, truth to power. But at the same time, you need to be humble enough, modest enough, ashamed enough that you don't assert your words as being law because you recognize that the power exists in the other person. And so it is a paradox that one needs to have the humility of being a good Confucianism and have, a degree of zhou with what they say. And at the same time, have that boldness of character, that unreservedness to be able to what's the word remonstrate with someone who is in a position over you.
Yeah, Amal is very right on this one. That's a very difficult thing, and then I think next week we will read. You should even use
but I would like to say that it's an apparent paradox, but it's not a paradox. Okay, in the sense that you have to be bold in your heart, in your mind, in your soul. But when you express it, you have to express it with a certain reservation, if not timidity, if not shyness, if not reticence. Okay, in the sense that, as Aman said, that you acknowledge the other as being the seat of power, so you don't want to impose yourself on him, because you know perfectly that the best way to influence him is not by imposing yourself on him, but rather, if you're very skillful, to make him think that he got the idea and not you.
But and I have to ask this. So, because I'll have to go back and look, and I think Yulia is right about not being ashamed at some point. But ultimately, isn't Confucius about the golden mean? So, what it would be is one side humility and the other side pride. Is the way I'm thinking about it, and it's somewhere in between that he would, that would be, and shame how somehow figures into that, I guess, as well as like kind of striking that balance.
Well, I would say that in your mind, your heart, and your soul, if you think that you have the truth and you think that you have the right answer and you want to speak to power, that's, I would say, that would be the inner power. Okay, but with that inner power, you have to express it in a soft manner, because and in Chinese, Eastern Asian society, there is a perception that the softer you are, you would be perceived as powerful. Okay, because when you get angry, or when you speak with a loud voice, or when you are impolite, it is perceived that you lost control, and that is not perceived as power but as weakness.
Well, anyway, we run out of time because I was planning to read up to 24. Just put a mark on chapter 22. Okay, Confucius talk about the don't cheat, don't deceive your boss, but you can offend him. Okay, use the word fun. Okay, that's a strong word. So in a way, you can call it a paradoxy or not paradoxy, doesn't matter. But basically, that's a two-way. You need to.
It sounds like the relationship with the father in the previous chapter.
His father.
Yes.
It sounds exactly like the same thing, where whether or not you turn in your father for doing something wrong.
Yeah.
Anyway, you mean the previous chapter? You mean 19?
Was it 19? 19 and 13? 13, 19? Let me see. I think so.
I don't see it's related to father here.
It was in 13. It had to be.
I don't see here it's a father.
18.
18. No, there's no father. He's subordinate. So, I think the book 14 has no father relationship.
Are you sure? I'm looking at the Duke of Shi informed Confucius, saying, among here there are those who may be styled upright in their conduct. If their father have stolen a sheep.
Chapter? Which chapter?
13. Book 13, chapter 8.
Oh, book 13. Okay, book 13, yes. Okay, but book 14, I don't see they have a...
No. Yeah.
Book 13, 18?
Yes. I think it's similar to number 22.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so this one is, you see, that's a different, right? Confucius said, right, if your father made mistake, you try to cover it, okay? And then in 1422, we will read the next week. I think we can bring up this with your boss, okay, you need to offend, okay, fun, okay, so that means you need to point out he's wrong. I don't know it's conflicts or not, but
it's role ethics at a certain point.
So I think that's worth to talk about this. But of course I should not claim I'm an expert on Confucianism, but that's the different situation if you compare these two chapters, right? One talking about your father stole a sheep, you try to cover it, that means straightforward. And the next week we talk about your boss, you should not deceive him, but you can offend him. Okay. That means your boss made mistake, you say, oh, sir, that's not the right way to do something like this. So
Yes. Well, we have a very practical reality nowadays, illustrating perfectly that Confucian reality. Because you know perfectly that, for example, the US intelligence services, when they will give their reports to the US president, sometimes they know perfectly that for political reason, the president doesn't want to hear certain reality, and they would lie to the president. Okay, so
Yeah.
and because they know that the
That's absolutely
president is
true.
the seat of power, and maybe they're not loyal enough to talk the truth to the US president precisely.
That's actually a very interesting point. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a similar circumstance where, yes, they're actually just maybe they're going to tell him what he wants to hear, or actually tell them what's in their interest, probably as well, which is probably the same scenario that was leaders had faced back then, where they didn't necessarily get perfect information, which actually leads directly back to number 13, where you really are measuring the integrity of the individual that is actually sharing the information with you. And then what is maybe, and I think that this is an interesting question. If I can find my notes from earlier this morning. Being posed the questions of how do you validate the information that you're taking in. I would like to hear if anybody has any ideas of how they go about that. So, because it's valid, even if as individuals, or even if you're the president of the United States. Anybody have any thoughts on that? How they validate? Well, I think one thing is to have primary sources, and the way those primary sources are actually derived was one of the ideas that I thought about. Those primary sources are derived based on evidence of accurate information from past events. So that's what I had some friends that were actually did some predictive modeling based off of essentially news, and they would have primary and secondary and third and fourth, and the sources were basically stratified into different categories, obviously, and the primary sources were obviously valid. Whenever an event occurred, they captured it, and whether they captured it correctly or not. Anyway, that I think that's a valid way of actually just testing in general. And as we're seeing in number 13, is that how do you know the words of this individual really represent whether or not this is somebody that is, as he put it, what was it? As he put it, something along the lines of what is 13 actually? Basically, true master that speaks not, laughs not, and takes not. Essentially, he does all things well. It sounds like not all things, but a lot of things well, with the right amount of temperance. But how do you then believe the person that's telling you? Because Confucius is telling you to be skeptical in this instance. Anyway,
Yeah. I would like to suggest that it depends of the practical situation, and I would like to give a practical situation as it happens many times in ancient China. Okay, suppose that the specific dynasty had its capital city at Beijing. Okay, the same capital city than present-day China, and you send a general to what is called Tibet or Xinjiang nowadays, and what for a military campaign. You trust him enough to give him the command of a big army, but most of the emperors would name secretly 2 junior officers that would check on the general and would send to the emperor regular reports on the behavior of the general commanding in chief.
so from that, you could, I'm assuming that there's some high degree level of fidelity in the information that you're receiving.
Yes, because you have 2 different junior officers spying
Right.
on the general, and the 2 junior officers don't know the role of each other. Okay, so you have junior officer A spying on the commander in chief, and junior officer B spying on the commander in chief, but neither of them know that they have that specific roles. So it's across the verification, if you want.
So would that be ethical in Confucius's world?
Excuse me?
Would that be considered ethical?
Absolutely, because the ruler had the duty to be sure that the commander in chief in a foreign province would not cheat him. Okay, it's part of the duty of the rulers.
Well, and that goes back to even something with Socrates, right? The idea, would you ever tell a lie? Well, in battle, you would maybe. In other words, that, and this is not necessarily a lie. It's a lie of omission, because you're not telling somebody else that you're independently verifying their information.
Yeah. And
So,
once again, what are your duties? Okay, and if we take again the example of the emperor of China, his duty is to maintain peace and order, and it's part of his duties to be sure that his commander in chief 4,000 miles away would not betray him, because if that commander in chief 4,000 miles away betray him, it would cause havoc within the empire.
now, one of the questions that I wanted to actually also revisit was one that Mark had brought up, if he's still there, related to the relationships in, I think it was probably 14. Yeah, the 5 relationships and how they appear. I'm looking for them because I posted them in the chat. Oh yeah, here we go. The 5 fundamental relationships, and for anybody that doesn't know them, this is basically the fundamental basis for how individuals are to interact with one another. So there's the ruler and subject, father and son, husband and wife, I'm sorry, and elder brother and younger brother, and friend and friend. So in this particular instance, we're looking at number 14 or 15, 14. It seemed to be like a father and son and a ruler and subject. So what would actually take precedence? Father and son, I'm assuming.
I would say most of the time, probably, but in some specific cases, and there are historical instances for that, certain people chose the ruler over their fathers, but it's in the minority.
Well, yeah, that's going the other direction. Yeah, okay. That makes sense.
And that makes sense. Let's say there is a mechanical answer, okay? The mechanical answer is that your sovereign is above your father. However, most of the people in flesh in the history of China, most of the time chose their father over their sovereign. In case of a conflict, of course.
Sure. I think that makes perfect sense. And that's interesting to see how the 5 ways actually just, did actually, were applicable to that. Let me see, I'm going through some of the other notes that, actually, are there any overall comments up to the first 19 or 20 books at all? I mean, I think that the themes that I'm obviously seeing within this are, related to leadership, the particulars of what it, means to be a leader at that particular moment in time. And as far as one's personal virtue and how that actually relates to your civic virtue. And I think that that's interesting to explore, because I believe that's something that needs to be restored in today's world. Is that civic virtue in particular? I think it's missing. And let me think here. Yeah, I mean, I guess there's this, the main theme I'm seeing actually is, just looking through notes, is this personal virtue related to, and how it relates to the society as a whole. And I think that's for the first 20 that I'm seeing. It's a societal benefit, and how personal virtue relates to that.
Is it for a certain class of people? Because there are different levels, right?
Yeah, that too. That too. Which adds to the complexity. So that's a very good point. Yeah, so that your role is also, dictates your actions as well. And what is beneficial for society. I mean, that's that comes back to the idea of either do you speak truth to power or not. And I think he does in this, particularly number 20. So, wait a minute, I might be off on that. Number 19. So, what themes have you taken actually from this book 13, 14?
Could I just mention, Joe, that one of the things that really impressed me was that chapter about how that weaker king had survived because he had these 3 amazing advisors. And that really, I think, underlined the importance of that position administratively and nationally for the Chinese at this time.
Good point. And I think that also comes back to how do you know who to trust?
And how do you pick your own cabinet?
Exactly.
Maybe you have to pick people that will disagree with you.
Well, I'd hope that, but in the sense that are they loyal is another question.
Yeah.
And
But
loyalty is the bigger issue.
but ultimately, you if you were a sovereign, your ideal ministers would not be loyal to you. Your
Yeah,
ideal mi- your ideal minister would be loyal to Chinese civilization. And the three outstanding ministers who served Duke Ling of Wei were probably bright enough to see that he was a quite mediocre ruler, but they were not personally loyal to him. They were personally loyal to the state of Wei, to the idea of the Chinese civilization. So they can transcend the reality of a mediocre ruler.
very
I'll tell
modern
you, that's
value.
we're missing that today.
No, no.
I mean, you disagree, Dave?
Oh, we talked about the other day. I thought that when Trump was in and there were people who were denying him information and access to codes and things that, like discouraging his being in the position of exercising certain powers because the good of the world and the United States seemed to be a higher value than serving this man in a certain loyal way that he considered loyalty, which was about him, not the role, because he never realized that the difference between himself and the role.
I would say that was true just in that particular instance, but I would say that the Congress and in the Senate that they have used or essentially they've been within the constitutional rules, but they've actually not necessarily held up and served their duty and actually put their parties before country more times than not. And so I think at a lower level,
I think my example, you're right, as you're pointing out, is a 1% example, and your example is a 99% of cases example. And you're right, Joe.
Yeah, and it's just I mean and that's why I just think about the the roles of the Senate not confirming whether it be judges, whether it be military officials, the idea of just obstructing, and there's this idea that there's a loyalty to the party before there is, and if you do cross the boundaries, you'll see what happens. You'll not necessarily be around too much longer. So it's interesting to see that how the ethics from Confucius really are necessary and needed in today's institutions, at least our politicians anyway. It makes it timeless.
Mm-hmm.
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
But
that's why the classical education or the timeless education, bringing you to the timeless forms of beauty, goodness, and truth, or justice, valor, humanity, and wisdom, is absolutely the core essential. Because if you have an aristocratic class, and when I say aristocratic, I don't necessarily mean hereditary nobility, but rather meritocratic class that is numerous enough, you would be capable to transcend some mediocre rulers.
and I think that one of the most important things is that when we talk about Confucius is the idea of balance and harmony. So by essentially, and this comes, and if you even look at the Greek concepts of justice in general, that by practicing virtue itself, that there are a set of ethical principles that you're following that contribute to the harmonious social order. And so, and I think that that's something that's essential, or an essential element of Confucianism. So, you know, and then there's the element of not only from a personal perspective, but also the public service and virtuous leadership. So there's balance and harmony at the everyday level that you're responsible for. But there's also the public service, which is more about virtuous leadership and governance, which is what we've been reading about for this chapter. And where the leaders are exhibiting the virtues in their positions, and they're prioritizing the people, essentially, ought to be anyway, and that this ultimately leads to some degree of stability in society. So I think that this is something that, I mean, this is obviously core to Confucianism. I mean, you're even talking about loyalty to the state here, which gets a little bit deeper, and it's about your relationship to the state, which is, you know, kind of interesting in and of itself.
Yes.
But I think that that's actually the reason why modern day China is very much aligned with these principles.
Yes. Well, and ultimately, okay, because what loyalty to the state truly means, okay, ultimately is loyalty to the people. Ultimately.
Right.
Okay. I would like to introduce a very down-to-earth differentiation. Okay. The sailors, the airmen, and the infantrymen in the Chinese army swear the oath of loyalty to the Communist Party of China. Okay, they don't swear the oath of loyalty to the Constitution, and they don't swear the oath of loyalty to the Chinese nation. However, the Communist Party of China is perceived as a tool to protect the Chinese nation. So ultimately, the oath is to the Chinese people.
It's indirect.
So,
It's indirect. So you have to trust that there won't be a gap in the leadership of that party that has a moral flaw, and your own moral judgment is therefore not adequate.
Exactly. You're very right to stress that, David, because and it reflects one of the beliefs within the Chinese ruling class mythology that is very top down, okay? That is the trust of the people to the present aristocratic oligarchy, okay? And the present aristocratic oligarchy is called the Chinese Communist Party. In the past, it could have been the Han Dynasty, the Ming Dynasty, the Tang Dynasty. Now it's the CPC dynasty.
Right. Well, this is
yeah.
what the Enlightenment is supposed to be, the break with letting your think be subordinate to an external think.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
Exact, because you have to proceed through a tool, okay? In the sense that power has to be exercised through tools.
And this is something I was trying to reconcile, and this is completely off topic. But
sorry to interrupt you. Go ahead. I wouldn't keep on after.
Oh, okay. It was just you know, I was bringing up, and it was just David and I think that night, but it was the idea of how Epictetus arrived at the same conclusions of how to interact with your father as did Confucius in number 13, 1313. So, but the reasons and how they arrived there are very different. One was the personal integrity and your role, and that's something that you can control. So you can't control who your father is, but that's the reason why you do it. But the other reason for the Confucius aspect of it was that there was more of an external influence as to why you didn't necessarily act against your father. So one was internal, and one was external, from what I remember. And I
Yeah,
think that that's
absolutely.
kind of, and there's that distinction is a very important one to be able to make, because it's interesting how they led to the same action, however, that for very different reasons. And virtue would be the unifying factor.
Yeah. I like that idea of external, internal, okay? Because um, you always have a certain external incentives to go on the path of power, that's for sure, okay? You would have some external benefits for sure, but at the same time, are you epistemologically developed enough to understand that those external element of powers or tools of power are only tools to the greater idea of the people and of the civilization that you serve? Okay, so that's to have the perfect person that would serve only out of perfect devotion and wisdom would be an extreme case that I don't think there are many people like that. And the corrupt person that would go into politics and to the path of power because he wants to accumulate the wealth and power precisely would be the other extreme. Okay, so I would say that most people are somewhere between the two. And there is a very fragile line when the virtuous element wouldn't be, let's say, enough to make things run correctly. And
Right.
I want to give a very practical example. Within the Chinese government, they are perfectly that there's a certain amount of corruption. But corruption to what extent? Okay, is it the kind of corruption that will stop the project, that will make the bridge collapse? That kind of corruption is not acceptable. But the kind of corruption that the guy responsible of the project would take certain liberty with the public budget, but would be capable to run the project, and that the bridge would not collapse, and that the people would be happy. There's a margin of maneuver, taking into account the reality of human weaknesses, but at the same time, the obligation to fulfill your public duties in a serious manner.
Some of what you and Joe are saying lines up with the once again back to the Enlightenment for a second, the internal external authority, or how the judgment is made, what is being done. Looking at the action alone, as Joe said, is very ambiguous. You can have the same action motivated in two completely different ways. So the question, right, what is happening, and whether you're going to interpret this as, oh, that was good, or this is bad, but at least the action has a potentially beneficial result. But the internal logic of it, are you calling it epistemological, but the internal logic of it. So it's sort of like saying the conditional value of it, it was done conditionally. And the conditional imperative in Kantian morality has no moral value. It's the original cause for choosing this conditional series of things. You're going to, do this, and they pick up the hammer and do this to build a bridge. None of that matters. Was the intention something that is worthy and good and beneficial, and you're going to carry it out, and you're going to spill some blood along the way. Okay, you're not trying to do that. You're trying to build a bridge. So, the source of the intent is unconditioned good. That's how you judge. A categorical imperative, not the hypothetical steps along the way. Although that doesn't mean I'm saying the ends have justified every possible means. Not saying that.
Right.
Saying the means are trivial compared to the ends that were originally put into this action. And that's something that, you know, you can't tell from the action alone. And that's why you have to make the decision. You're not going to, you may be judged on the actions, but you have to have the integrity making the decision. And so how can someone tell you, trust our integrity? You have to see it in light of everything you know, because you're in the actual real situation that their general principle is going to be applied to. And you say, I see more than your general principle. I have to make my determination. I'm taking my men into this situation. You know, what am I going to do? I'm not going to wipe out the village. Whatever I'm told, you have to have the big context. And every human being has the capability with their reason, supposedly, to see the big context and knowing you're doing something right or wrong at some level. I mean, we're not robots yet.
Yeah. And I
Right.
would say that we need to go back to a very basic principle, okay? A tree is judged by its fruits. And uh, if you have good fruits for a very long time,
Okay.
that tree must be good, okay? Because if you have good fruits for a very long time, and most of the time, the different aristocratic oligarchy having the pretension to be capable to give good fruits at the beginning, we just have to trust their word. And after 1, 2, 3 generations, you are more capable to look at the fruits.
It's very interesting, Quan, because you're talking about generations of leadership.
Yeah.
And to me, that is interesting in a certain kind of structured society. But I'm not sure how to apply it in the context of actual decision making as an individual, or are looking at ideals. Will this ideal work in some cases? Will it work in other cases? I don't know that it what applies to trees doesn't necessarily apply to ideas.
That's a metaphor. I mean that I would say that paradoxically, according to my understanding, at the personal individual, it's even easier because you know if you're sincere with yourself, you know perfectly what are your intentions. Okay, and you want to reach a certain goal. Let's say you know perfectly what are your intention if you're sincere with yourself, and two, you know, if you're clear-minded enough, you know what are the connections, the skills that you have to develop in order to get to the result or the product you want. Okay, so maybe I didn't understand your question, but I think at the personal level, it's even easier than at the power level for collectivity.
Well, we're having an interesting discussion. I wanted to say one thing about your example that I personally would say my failures are what are making me better at doing things correctly. So in terms of leadership, really bad results is leading me towards, you know, those generations of bad kings actually are leading to a good ruler. And I'm learning, you know, misjudging because I'm too passionate about this. I have to, or I'm not, you know, willing to sacrifice enough about it, whatever it is. And it's working the opposite way in a certain sense. You see what I'm saying?
Well, I see what you're saying, but I would like to challenge you a little bit. I agree with you that on the personal level, if you have enough stamina and fortitude, your failures would make you better and stronger. I absolutely agree with you on the personal level. But for a dynasty of sovereigns, if you have 5 bad kings in a row, I'm not sure it's so good. Okay, because the sixth one might be the last.
Great.
Can I have to pose you know, something that's interesting, because if you're going to say it's good, you know, and here's in a way 2 different ways of looking at something. And Mark, I see your hand up, so I'll let me just make this point. And this is just a thought experiment, and it may fall flat on its face, but, and I'm not making the case for for, let me just say at the outset, I'm not making the case for whether it's good or bad. But let's just take, I am not necessarily a fan of the income disparity and the idea of the billionaire class, right? I'm not a fan of that. However, both China and the United States seems to think that that's an important part of governing, in my opinion. It seems that they have become somewhat dependent on this streamlined, whatever, unelected way of functioning, whether it be the U.S. or whether it be now the U.S. has a way of doing it, making their billionaires, whatever. Well, who knows how they do it, but supposedly they're doing it through, I don't know, through some free market, whereas China's, that's not being done that way. My point being is one's external and one's supposedly internal, even though I believe they're both external. But it's an interesting way of looking at that, how it manifests itself. Both see this as the good for the country, and they're willing to facilitate that type of, I don't know, abdicate certain powers in order to have those groups so that they can somehow expand their empires, so to speak. But it's interesting how they both have come to the conclusion that reliance on that seems like a good idea. And I don't think it does, but I mean, I think you're giving it away. But China seems to have definitely bought into that. I mean, I just looked up; they have 969 billionaires, and we have 691.
Yeah, but I want to I don't want to interrupt Mark, but I would take 10 seconds, okay? I would like to say that both China and the US believes in oligarchy, okay? And but there's a small difference. The powerful oligarchy in China is the political oligarchy, and the powerful oligarchy in the US is the financial and economic oligarchy. But both of the countries believe in oligarchy for exercising power. And I stop here. I don't want to prevent Mark to speak.
And financial is, well, anyway. All right, yeah, go ahead, Mark.
I didn't want to go in a different direction at all, but I know that you guys were talking about Kant at one point, and I thought I heard someone say that we know our intention, but I think David knows this more than I do, but for Kant, you don't even necessarily know whether your intention is pure or not.
That's not my understanding. David?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think a little more than Quan was acknowledging, and I'm not sure Quan is making an absolutist point here, that as much as we reflect on ourselves, we discover that actually we have responded to inclinations inadvertently. We have been compelled by things we didn't cross-examine. As much as we know ourselves, we have more to learn, and we find that our purest intentions aren't always exactly what we were acting on. So there is doubt about that, but that doesn't change the moral structure of you should do what you know is right. It's just a problem in terms of doing it. You may be fooling yourself.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
That's
well,
it.
maybe I have a self-delusion, but it can be debatable. I always knew what I wanted. I always knew my intention, but maybe it might pass as a delusion.
For some reason, I had some Chinese people have been very clear about what they're doing and why they're doing it in a way that knocks me over. And so there may be a cultural difference, but I find it hard. And the critical thing is that Socrates, know yourself. This is a Freudian level of that. It's like, oh, know yourself? There's the question. You know yourself. But it's
Yeah.
more of a Western neurosis.
The intentions can change, okay? But let's
That's all.
say, but within, I would say that, how can I say it? The foundational intention don't change that much. That's my experience.
You know, people are
Say that, wait a
so
minute.
conflicted.
Say that again.
Yeah. Foundational.
Foundational.
Yeah, don't
Yeah.
change.
Well, I don't want to generalize, okay? In my case, the foundational intentions don't change that much. But I cannot talk for
I
others.
agree.
That's for sure. I want to I want to be modest and follow Confucius' advice.
Right. Otherwise, it'll be
Oh, you're
hard to.
all right.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's hard to fulfill. Yeah.
Yeah, exact.
I think one of my biggest takeaways here are essentially is seeing this distinction of duty and how it's viewed kind of in a Western context versus in current day China. Or even no, actually even in Confucius. I mean, it seems there is a slight difference, but it often results in the same actions. And why is that, though?
Can you repeat that, Joe? I was a bit absent.
Yeah, so
I'm sorry.
no, it wasn't really clear. So the idea of duty, in whether you're in the United States and versus in China, there seems to be two different forms of obligation. Like in the United States, you're more obligated to, I would say, private interests. And where in China, you're more obligated to collective interests, right? Is that fair?
Yes, I think so. It's the differences in culture, absolutely.
So, but they
Yeah,
seem like they take a lot of the same actions.
Why would that be a conflict or surprise? I mean, take care of yourself means don't be a burden on anyone. So that's a social good to not demand things of people, which makes you helpful in terms of consuming resources, right?
Yeah, but I would say that when the United States was in her shining moments, of course, the individual freedoms and so on and blah 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 was at the core of the U.S. culture. I agree, but at the same time, there was also a preoccupations of the common good. So I think that
Right.
the two stuff are not in contradiction.
I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, I was actually just researching what James Madison had said about virtue, and I'll pull it up in a second, and I'll put it in the chat.
Yeah, the church guys who, they had to take care of their communities. They believed that was like so fundamental. That's why they wanted everyone to participate communally in church so that their private lives were entirely entangled in terms of group responsibility.
Wait, I'm just reading your comment about billionaires right now. But anyway, you said it is more that the billionaires tell the government what they can and should do than that the opposite is true. Yeah, I mean, in China, the opposite is true, you're saying, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought
Because
that
the billionaires don't really have any real power, because if they step out of
Yes.
line, they're not going to be billionaires anymore.
Well, you know what happened to Jack Ma, okay?
Yeah, it's exactly what I'm referring to.
Yeah,
Oh.
in China, you have billionaires, but you don't have plutocrats, okay? Because the US is a plutocracy, and China is a government by meritocracy. Okay, it doesn't mean that you don't have good plutocrats in the US, okay? Because in the 19th century and the beginning of the 20th century, you have good plutocrats, in my understanding, in the US, like Henry Ford, like the Vanderbilt, the people who built the US, okay, essentially from the 19th century to the 20th century. They were working for their own private profits, of course, but they were capable to give to the common good too.
No, I don't know that. I always have a problem with those guys. I understand that that was probably the most prosperous time in United States history, but it was built on the backs of slave labor, and it was horrible. I mean,
Yes,
these guys these people. Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, they were all those ugly things, I admit, but there was also the idea of the common good.
Yeah, I mean, after they got everything, but there was perhaps more of I don't know, that we still had issues, but it's yeah, I understand what you're saying. I do think that there's less of an idea about the common good now.
Oh, now
Like
that's for sure. Now that's for sure. Okay, now we have a, I'm sorry to be direct, but now we have a degenerate plutocracy. That's for sure.
No, that's completely fair. It'll be interesting to see, what do you think is more sustainable out of the two, with a rising middle class in China?
It's difficult to say, because I believe very much that we have a common human nature, that's for sure. Okay, so when we speak about justice, humanity, valor, wisdom, it's the same for the Chinese and the same for the Westerners. I have no doubt about that. But maybe the paths are different. The style are different. Okay, and I would say that the Westerner was extraordinarily successful during the last 2 centuries, and I would say that there must be something good in their system making them successful in the last 2 centuries. So maybe they would have to find their style to goodness, to valor, humanity, justice, and wisdom. And the Chinese has another style, okay, but embodying the same basic virtues.
So, a culture that's lost virtue, how do you reintroduce it?
I know that it's a very banal, cliche answer, but you have to reintroduce classical education, okay? And classical education in the West, for me, means Plato, Aristotle, the classical authors of ancient Greece, of ancient Rome, of the 17th, of the 18th, of the 19th century, the arts, etc., philosophy. And you might have noticed that all those stuff has been removed in the last 3-4 generations.
You didn't mention one controversial book, which probably is banned, the Bible.
Yeah, I was saying the Bible, yes. Yes, you're very right. The Bible would be a good
you guys are
classical, it would be a good book.
You know what? I just
Really?
wanted to mention, when I was in Beijing about 7 or 8 years ago for a few days, I went to the National Art Gallery, which was really wonderful. And they had some works of Diego Rivera there. And there was one very, very large painting in realism of people working all over this kind of, oh, no, I'm mixing up two paintings. Hold on. The one I'm thinking of is a painting of a man, I think, standing beside pile of rubble, and in the foreground is the Bible. And it always struck me as very curious.
I gotta be honest, I did not expect to hear that answer from either anybody. I really
What
didn't.
answer?
Anyway,
What answer? What answer?
Bible,
The
the
Bible?
Bible.
Classical education, that's just part of classical education, Shakespeare.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, you know,
I,
teaching the humanities, you don't have 1,000 recipes, huh? It's reading great texts and discussing about those great texts.
Yeah.
so let me ask, then how does China, well, I don't know if it's virtue, but I guess, can it sustain, whatever its current path?
It will depends on how the present ruling class would be capable to eradicate corruption and bring it down to a reasonable degree, and keep on the meritocratic system, meaning letting new blood at each generation. Okay, because that is the core engine.
Oh,
Okay,
I agree with you on that.
meritocracy, really having new blood at each generation, and curbing corruption as low as possible.
But, I'll never go against democracy as a choice, but I will say this: if you had this constant turnover, and whereas you didn't necessarily, where it was more of a meritocracy in China, where they were, constantly having new blood. I'm not so sure we do that all that well.
Yeah.
Once people are billionaires, just like families for generations go on.
Yes, that's very interesting. Okay, because I don't remember the name of the economist. I think that it was Piketty. He's a French guy. He wrote a book which is very interesting, maybe 10 years ago, demonstrating that most of the rich people in the West since the last two generations are coming from old money, and there are less and less people from new money.
Right, inheriting is the usual way to be wealthy.
Yeah, it's inheriting it, and it's, I don't think that that's very efficient, or beneficial. I'll just say and I'll actually go ahead, Mark, because I'm going to post something that at a meetup I took a screenshot of earlier this evening. Go ahead, Mark.
Oh, thanks, Joe. Quan, I wanted to ask you, because you've mentioned and discussed many times the four cardinal virtues of justice, valor, humanity, and wisdom, as well as beauty, truth, and goodness. And I think I know what you're talking about, but I'm wondering, what are the Chinese words for the things that you're talking about? Because the only thing I can put to a Chinese word would be humanity, which I think is Ren.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So the easy way to answer is once again with the hexagram, okay, because the lower trigram are sense of perception, intellect, and psyche, and the Chinese words for that is qi, chu, and sin. Okay, that is the lower trigram, the animal kingdom. And when I'm speaking of the
Spell the
virtues,
last word. Can you spell that last one?
The last word is
Sin.
Xin. Okay, it means the heart. So it's the psyche in English, or the heart mind in English, if you want. That is the lower trigram, the animal kingdom. And what Mark was talking is about the upper trigram, the divine kingdom,
Right.
or the timeless kingdom or timeless reality. And the Chinese words for beauty is yi, okay, but yi doesn't mean beauty. Yi means justice, okay, but the Chinese, rather than using mei, which is beauty, they prefer to use yi, which is justice. And the timeless form of beauty corresponds precisely to the humane virtue of justice. And the fifth line is a run, as you said, Mark, and it's humanity, but it also includes valor. And the last line is wisdom, is chu in Chinese, but chu is the same pronunciation that the second line. But here it's very interesting. At the second line, chu for intellect, you have two components in the character. Okay, you have an arrow with a mouth. Okay, so the intellect is when you are skillful in your physical capabilities and your intellectual capabilities, the capacity to talk, to have concept, ideas, images, and words. Okay, but the chu of the sixth line, even if it's pronounced almost the same because it's at the fourth tone at the sixth line and at the second tone at the second line, but for non-Chinese, the difference cannot be perceptible. But the chu at the sixth line, you have three components. You have the arrow, you have the mouth, meaning the intellect, but under that, you have a sun, meaning the sun of the absolute of wisdom, enlightening the intellect. So that is the sixth line, wisdom, chu. I don't know if I answer your question,
Thank
Mark.
you. Thank you. Thank you.
You
That was-
did.
yes, very helpful.
And actually
Okay.
what Kevin put in the chat as well. But anyway, just to go back to the point a little bit earlier about, and I don't want to get into the whole distribution thing, but this was a number that was thrown out at the previous meetup right before I got here. That the increased efficiency are going to the top 1%, and 80% of the benefits is going to the top 1% of the top 1%. So, I mean, I don't know. And those numbers are over the last 40, 50 years. He could have sourced it for me. But I'm going to ask him about that. But that's staggering. That is staggering. And anyway, it just goes back to the point that I was making a little bit earlier. I don't know if that's necessarily something that's sustainable. Anyway, maybe I'll Quan, are you leading a I just got an annoying email. Are you leading the discussion on Friday or Saturday? Sorry.
Well, not this Saturday. If the schedule did not change,
It's the 21st.
I'm supposed to deliver a speech on Wu Zetian, an impress of the Tang Dynasty, on October 21st.
Yes, I'm sorry. Okay, so it's not this weekend.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. For some reason, I thought it was, but I'm glad you corrected it.
Yeah.
Okay, and so just to run through some announcements, what we have going on this week. It is, hang on one second. Anyway, tomorrow we're comparing Nietzsche, Carl Jung, and Julian Jaynes, which is a really interesting combination. Actually, you know, I'm sure you're busy, but Quan, you probably would like that. And on Thursday, all right, what do you say I am? Asked Jesus. What is your answer? So that's Thursday. I always think it's Aristotle, and it's not. And then on Friday is Medea. I'm sorry, by Euripides. And Saturday was Louis Sullivan's System of an Architectural Ornament, How Does Form Follow Function, which is actually very, very deep. There is a online Asian philosophies meetup, but I don't think there's actually anything to that. And then we're back next week. So that's the schedule for the weekend.
When is the I am discussion?
Thursday. And then, I'm gonna miss that. There's a few thinkers that are like three thinkers that they put together and kind of look for common trends. But that's an interesting group. Julian Jaynes, Carl Jung, especially if you think about Julian Jaynes and Carl Jung and how they use stories. Or even, they've both written extensively about, archetypes. Well, and then Julian Jaynes has written about the Bible. Since you guys are talking about the Bible, and he's written extensively about the Bible. And then there's Nietzsche, who also wrote about it as well. So anyway, that should actually be a pretty interesting meetup. That's something that you might like, David, but I know you're busy. But anyway, that's what we got going on this week. I appreciate you guys hanging out with me for the hour. I'm really looking forward to seeing you guys again next week.
Yep. See you guys next Tuesday. Ciao.
All right. Take care, everybody.
Bye.